Okay, we're now recording. Welcome to class.
Okay, welcome to class. A few people will not be with us tonight, so we're going to record, of course, and then send it out to them. You're welcome to look at it again too. So let me give you an idea of what we're going to do tonight. Got some opening comments. We're going to go around. We want to hear from everybody about one success this week and one failure, and how things went in general. We'll talk about that a little bit. And Jesse then has some comments with about Mark Manson. An interview by Marie Forleo. You know who she is? Yes. Okay. And then we're going to move to narrowing objectives for next week. So this next week in the project is going to be different, and we'll talk to you about that, and we'll have some time to talk about it and get you focused for the week. And that should cover it. Some simple things. So any general questions or comments before we start to get going?
Yeah, if anybody has any sort of general feedback on procedural things, we always want to give you guys a chance to have a little input on how things are going, not content-wise, but procedurally, especially because you guys are the pilot group. Anything that's been annoying or challenging in terms of,
besides us.
Yeah, in terms of the technology or the format. Okay.
Okay.
Good. Do we want to give them a couple? How about this? Why doesn't everybody take, maybe 60 seconds to think about the question? I think it was good to ask, to give everyone a little bit of time last class before we had our compelling discussion. So the question that we're asking is, think back to your immersive experience of doing your best to be your ideal self across your personality contexts, across your life contexts. We'd love to hear one success from everybody and also one failure that kind of jumps out at you as meaningful for one reason or another.
And also feel free to throw in there how things went. We have few enough people tonight that we're not going to run out of time or anything. So take a few seconds to do that, and then we'll start talking. And Megan will go first. She just ran away.
All right. We'll see you in 60 seconds. Just take a minute to reflect and think about your week. Okay, I hope you had a second to think about that. Dad's going to run this discussion, so I will turn it over to you.
Okay, so Megan, you're in the top left of the screen. So it looks like you're going first on a success, a failure, generally how things went. Just say whatever you want that's relevant to you, and we'll go from there.
Insight.
Yeah. Profound insights
yeah,
first.
profound. That's what I meant. Profound insights. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think overall I was kind of pretty pleased. There wasn't anything where I was like, wow, I'm the worst person. I felt like my big success last week was I got up and went to a yoga class 3 mornings in a row, which normally I would have probably not gotten up for.
Okay.
So that felt really good to start my day that way, and that's kind of my ideal scenario. But then kind of on the flip side of that, I noticed that I've just really consistently do not go to bed when I want to. And something I noticed that was interesting, because it was really handy to kind of have the question all week long of well, what would my ideal self do in this scenario? And so what I noticed is that like I have like a contradiction, basically, like a conflict of like what my ideal self will do, because ideally there would just be like more time in the day.
Right.
And so like I noticed that at nighttime I both like want to get some stuff done and I want to relax and like cook and, you know, sit on the couch and, you know, kind of unwind from the day. And so, yeah, I mean, that was just like something that I haven't quite like reconciled yet as far as like how to handle that. But something that really consistently came up for me was that kind of feeling of, well, there's a couple things I want to do and there's not enough time to do it. So I end up basically putting myself to bed about an hour later than I ideally would, which wasn't a huge deal until I got to my weekend, which is my busiest part of the week. And, by Sunday, I was like, just like a mess. Like I was just really tired. I got through my whole really long day. And at the end of it, I just like completely collapsed. And so, yeah, I mean, that's going to be tiring kind of either way, but definitely would like to feel better through it and not feel so spent at the end of it. So, yeah.
Okay, so let me ask a question. Did you feel like that in other contexts you did some little things? Was this on your mind regularly? And
yeah,
just conscious of, you know, and it's not like you're this horrible person and, you know, you have so much to do, but I mean, you know, when you're with not just treating yourself, but when you're socializing and all that kind of stuff, do you feel like there was a sort of a better balance there?
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like I was asking myself the question, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised that I like feel like I generally show up the way that I want to show up in most cases.
Okay.
You know, it did, you know, there were a couple times where I was kind of like, am I being my ideal? Okay, yeah, you know, like
Right?
I
No.
did check in. And I do also feel like, and I don't know, like, I mean, it probably was because I was thinking about it, but I wasn't like subconsciously thinking about it and doing it on purpose. But I noticed that like the classes that I taught over especially the weekend, but maybe the whole week, I think, yeah, the whole week kind of in general, I just like, I really enjoyed. And I felt like I really kind of like connected to the students that much more and just was like that much more kind of like present and having fun with it.
Okay, because you were being ideal.
Yeah. So again,
Okay,
like
that's
that
great.
would be my ideal self, but it wasn't something where I was like, okay, go and be ideal. I just was kind of like, maybe it was just generally on my mind and I was feeling good about getting up and giving myself the time to go to yoga class in the morning. So my day just kind of had like a better kind of feeling to it because I was
That's great.
doing all those things I wanted to do.
So Allison, we're talking about one success, one failure, and how the week went in general. Think about it a little bit, and I'll get back to you after we go to Anya.
Okay.
So it's you. Unmute yourself.
Hey, that was a surprise attack.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're just going across the board here.
I can't. I'm sorry. I'm just teasing you. My success. Well, my success was odd. I felt relatively successful in the physical. The physical goals. It was relatively easy to increase my workout, that kind of thing. I was already doing what I was doing. Not eating gluten-free. I mean, eating gluten-free. Most of that was good. That was easy. Emotionally, what was interesting, my emotional goal was to act out of love and to lessen the stress response as my first, if something was stressful.
Yeah.
So that it wouldn't affect others around me. Well, so what showed up is everything that could cause me stress. There was a lot more of that, which I thought was so interesting and standard for me. If I want a lesson, just ask for it.
Right.
So I got a lot of stressors, and for the most part, I felt really good about the way that I responded. Just like a can-do attitude. So I mean, everything, like really ridiculous things.
Okay.
That was good. I mean, really ridiculous things.
Like what?
And
You got to indulge us now.
okay, literally, a inch-and-a-half size roach was on my bed last night. I mean, you can't get, that's the worst thing I could ever, that's just, I can't even,
Did you invite him to dinner or what?
I can't even, the exterminator asked me if I saved them for him so he could identify him. I said no.
Right.
So anyway, that was an example. That's just, I mean, bugs are bugs. We have a good house. It's not, I don't live in a slum, but boy.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
Exactly.
So just
this is, by the way, this is, I think there's going to be a lot of comments that are kind of getting at what I'm going to be talking about later, which is sometimes like becoming your ideal self is about caring about less rather than caring about more. Right?
Yeah.
You didn't cover it, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And the stress response. And then I noticed I had a fail. So my daughter, as an example, I responded to a medical professional because my daughter broke her foot in 2 places. Example, more stressors in a way that she didn't like. And I listened to her. I watched myself and I listened to her so that I could take down her stress level a bit. And that was a little because the medical professional was being rude, but instead of upping her stress, I tried, so there was I failed in my response, but then I changed it. So I was able to pivot, I guess is what I'm saying.
What's
there was a lot going on.
Stuff like that is that kind of behavior is self-reinforcing because you do something that makes you feel good. And you think like, oh, I like the way I feel. I like the way I responded to this. Maybe next time I'll respond, in a similar way.
Right.
Like
Do good, be good.
Do good, be good. So,
thanks.
Okay. Allison, can we come back to you?
Sure. So I think me and Megan should check in more regularly because kind of similar to her, I found a similar theme in that I was kind of surprised pleasantly in that like things that were coming up and I wasn't really finding my ideal and how I was acting to be in conflict. That was kind of nice. I analyzed it in a bit of a different way though. I had thought perhaps because I didn't do the background work of that personality analysis, I kind of figured that I wasn't catching these nuances in like the kind of smaller portions of my day. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But then what I did kind of lean on the project for, which I thought was really great, was it gave me like a lot of greater accountability for like the bigger changes that I had kind of ring fenced as wanting to make, and like which were kind of like bigger actions, not like day-to-day decisions, whereas like how I'm behaving in a certain situation, but more of kind of taking action to move forward like a bigger change. Like one of the things that I guess what I would consider success is that since I've switched industries, I've like really struggled to fit exercise and health back into my life just because of the way like my work is structured. But I spent quite a lot of time researching a club and got like really excited about it. I found one that's like the facilities look beautiful and it's really easy to get to from work and home. So I feel like it's something that I'll actually stick to and go to because it's easier for me. And then I funnily enough found out that I have an employee discount on it. So that feels really good there and like a big win for me. I guess the failure in that same theme is that I didn't actually get my ass to the gym at all this week. So that is
one step at a time.
That, it's just something that I kind of make the excuses for, but I'm hoping that this setup will make it easier for me and get me excited to go.
Okay.
So yeah.
Good. We've mentioned a few times and we'll mention again, because it's really relevant, that in the studies that we did, doing this in class, 2 things out of the 6 comments that came up very regularly, 2 of them are always really relevant. One was that people found this week that it was easier than they thought and they felt better about themselves. And that couldn't be better. It couldn't be better. 2 comments that almost 2,000 people made on trying this out, that like, oh, the week wasn't as hard as I thought and things weren't as hard as, so we have sort of mental blocks in a way sometimes. So, okay, good. Let's go on. Kristen? Okay.
Yeah. So I would say one of the biggest successes I found was like finding little strategies for myself that'll help me be the ideal self. So like one of the things I really wanted to work on was listening and responding rather than reacting,
Mhm.
which is like a huge issue I have.
That's slow thinking.
Yeah.
Slow thinking.
Good.
You got it. Thinking slow. Fast.
Especially with my students, even though they're 9 years old, like so many times I was like, wait, they're 9. That's why they're acting this way. So instead of just being like, go to your seat, I'm like,
It doesn't always help.
yeah, it doesn't. And like, so I found like throughout my workday, I was like so much more understanding and like empathetic towards them, like, and stuff like that. And I also deleted my Facebook. So,
All
or
right.
like,
Oh.
not the app, the app,
Whoa,
not
whoa,
the
whoa. Slow down. That's
that
awesome.
was a huge thing. So like throughout my preps throughout the school day, like usually I'm just like BSing around on it, but then I like actually having getting work done. And then like when the next class comes in, I was like, oh, I'm ready. Like I know what I'm going to do now. So I think that was like a big success, and I didn't miss it at all, really. Like,
Wow.
what have I missed out on besides a couple memes, maybe? I guess like the hardest thing, I guess, was like honestly like going out at night, like going out Friday night, and I did not make ideal choices, like what I ate on the train ride home and like how I felt the entire next day really affected, like I didn't go to the gym, like I laid in bed the whole day. So I was thinking like, would my ideal self have really gone out last night? But like I still want to do things like that.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I don't know. That
And
was
here's
like
the thing. The
the
idea
hardest.
of this is not that we're supposed to be inflexible, that we do the exact right thing at the exact right time. That's very dualistic. We need balance. Sometimes it's absolutely fine for you to go out and drink more than you wanted to and lay in bed the next day.
Yeah.
I don't see that as being an issue in any way, because we're talking about our behavior in general. And if we set our standards that high, we become dull.
Yeah.
And we can't, it's hard to be your best self 100% of the time. We don't even promote that. So, but what you're talking about is great. I mean, the stuff with your students and your time, that's excellent. Excellent. Okay, Kenny, you're up.
Good week trying to be my ideal self.
Mhm.
Tried it in lots of areas. I think one of the most, I tried it with my kids because I have found that I'm not always my most ideal self with them at times, the way I respond, or they're 16 and 13. So on any given moment can drive you to drink. But I had to, respond compassionately and empathetically and listen to what they were saying instead of just doing the, oh my God, you're just 16 or you're just 13. So that was good. I found myself thinking much more before I responded to them, which was nice. I also did that with my husband. There are many moments in the day I would like to throttle him. So that was good too, to just take a beat and then think about what I said. I tend to be really upfront, and I just cut through the crap always. That's just how I am. And that's not always the best communication style with my husband or my kids. So thinking about what comes out of my mouth first before actually saying it was a bonus this week. Yeah. And at work, I used it a lot too in my supervision. I have a pretty big team, and I have 6 direct reports. And so with them, sometimes I feel like I get caught up in their drama and their stress and what they pull me into. So this week, a couple of times I thought, okay, if I was the ideal supervisor or the ideal boss, how would I act? And so I did that on a couple of things. And actually one of my employees came back to me. She was moaning and groaning about something, and it's been the same situation over and over and over again with the same person that we work with. And I finally said, well, then just confront him. And because I don't want you to be back here in 2 days bringing me into this again. And she's like, you know what? Thanks for saying that. I just needed like a readjustment. So that was kind of nice to be able to also extend it into my workplace, and not be distant or I don't know what the word is, but be able to be in touch with them in a different way that I hadn't expected.
You know, something you mentioned, which people mention doing regularly, is when you're in a situation, just saying, what would my ideal self do?
Yeah.
Just casually, and it doesn't have to be in every situation you're in or whatever. But, and that, just that reminder in a way, and it says, oh, okay, I wouldn't, you know, I'd be more empathetic, or I would tell, you know, one of my people I'm supervising, hey, just, you know, go back at the guy.
Yeah. Maybe not getting caught up in the drama as much is what it felt like. And it actually felt pretty good because I was able to distance myself from some of the emotional. I tend to take people's stress on and pain on, and I always have. And so by doing that and giving them what their ideal self should maybe be doing too, it was cool because then I didn't have to own it and hold it. I could push it back out to them. So it made me better.
You said, sorry, that you said thinking about what their ideal self would do. That gives you an interesting perspective, let's say on a conversation or interaction, saying, okay, I think I'm trying to do my best here. Is the other person? Now, I don't know if you can call the person out, but that you can make some adjustments. Like, this person's not really listening to me, or just trying to drive something home, like your boss or something. And I think that's to assess the situation, not just your participation, but like what's happening here. That's great.
Fast change by proxy. You just opened up a whole new area for us. That's great. Thank you.
Well, there you go. Part 2, like we talked about, Eric.
Right. Cool. Thanks.
Cool.
Sure.
Kat, are you out? Kat, are you outside or what?
So
You're on the back porch?
heat in my house is not working right now, so I'm
Something like that.
freezing.
Well, come on over if you want to warm up.
I know.
5 hours.
So yeah. Sorry if I'm distracting over here. I'm so cold. I'm actually standing in my kitchen because it's the warmest room right now. But anyway, challenges this week. Actually, right now, I'm challenged to be positive about my situation. It's
good.
I am like really struggling at this moment as people are
ideal self life.
Yeah.
You know, Kat's going through it right now.
It's just one of those things. I mean, I keep telling myself like, oh, this is just one of those things that happens, but it snowed last night here in Knoxville, and it's just, it was a very inconvenient time for the heat to decide to stop working, and I won't have someone to come get it until tomorrow. So I know I'm gonna be cold, and so I'm dreading it and like trying to work on some positive self-talk and wrap some blankets around myself, I guess. I do think I'm going to go to my friend's house and stay the night because it's just too cold to sleep here. But anyway, so I think I'm neutral right now. I can't say I'm doing well with this particular situation, but I can't say I'm doing horribly with it. I'm, still working on being cool with the cold. Being cool.
How about other stuff? This just generally.
So I'm overwhelmed with the current situation, but Wednesday was really, really good. I felt like, all right, I'm so positive and gentle with my words and reacting so positively to everything and just being this ideal version of me. And I worked out and I was doing extra stretching and eating really well. And then Thursday, I realized that Wednesday wasn't this miracle that I had turned into my ideal self overnight, but that I just had a pretty easy day stress-wise. And that Thursday was a lot more stressful of a day. It was just very busy. But I still tried to keep up my ideal self motivations, but Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it was when I kind of felt like I fell off the wagon, mostly diet-wise, just because I had friends that wanted to go out and do activities, and I had told myself, oh, no, I'm not going to eat at the delicious Mexican place down the road, and then I went and did it anyway because my friends were going, and so I did kind of struggle with, what does my ideal self need in this situation. And I guess I could have, I didn't get a meal that I was particularly upset about by any means, but I didn't need to go, and I probably should have told them not to, but I had this positive interaction with my friends and had a great time, and it brought a lot of happiness to my life. So I was kind of on the fence as to whether I was good or bad. I mean, I can't necessarily think so dualistically about it, but it was hard to determine, maybe my ideal self does both of those things, stays home or, also goes out with friends. So I was a little bit on the fence about it. But last night I had a little bit of success. It sounds like a small thing, but after my softball game, all of our team goes to this one restaurant and they get these fries that have this amazing gravy or something on it. I don't know what makes them so good, but they're just like divine. And I knew I shouldn't get them. And so I kind of sat and thought about it before ordering and almost had an argument in my mind about it. And finally just said, no, there's no reason why I need this. And I didn't get it. So I actually felt like that was a big success for me. I really, I think I wanted it so badly, and I was looking at it on the menu and there's a picture of it and it's like I could almost taste it. And it's just one of those things that I've kind of come to want after those games. Like, it's a routine with the whole team that we all just get that. And so it actually did feel like a big accomplishment to resist that even when I wanted it so much.
Cool.
Let me make a quick comment there. Let me ask you a question, Dad, because there's something you said to me several times over these many years is the phrase, "I want the life of the poet, not the guru."
Okay, that's a good
What does that mean?
Okay, let me talk about that. So, and I have in class too, because when we do stuff in class, we're talking about human behavior and intentional self-development and all that. And I think what happens, and what some of you are struggling with, is you can't get really dualistic about this. If you want to be your ideal self, technically speaking, you don't want to be your ideal self 100% of the time. That's the guru. I want to be the poet. I want to fall off the wagon some. I want to drink too much sometimes. But in general, I really want to be centered, as a poet is, because he or she writes and things. So there's a fine line here, and there's a balance of thinking, okay, if I'm too nice to myself, do I end up just losing it all? If I'm too rigid with myself, do I, for a time, am I perfect? But then it's like, I don't want to live this way. I don't want the life of the guru. So the balance is somewhere in between. I'd say, depending upon how you think poets' lives are, somewhere in the middle. If you know poets who are a real wreck, then it would be closer to the guru's life. But you know what I'm saying? You don't want to hold yourself to a super high standard, even if you can make it. It's just not that valuable right now.
So we've talked about one of the worthy dozen being it's all inside, right? Self-plurality, multiplicity, multiple role identities. So maybe think about being the poet and the guru.
Yeah.
I want to be the poet and the guru.
Right.
Just in different situations.
So, Kat, when you said
right.
you one night you let things go, the other night you didn't, it felt good. Especially now when you think like, I didn't really need it. I didn't have it. I didn't need it. And of course, education by guilt. If you had done it, you'd feel really guilty. And, so, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we start to switch from this immersive form of change to picking out some things, like I said in the email, the daily dose, of, picking out a few things. The approach changes some. So anyway, we'll get to that in a little while. Okay, cool. Thanks. Ignacia, it's your turn.
Yeah, Ignacia, I think you came in after we sort of put the cue out there. So we're actually looking for something that like a success over this past week and a failure, and just kind of any insight you might have overall.
Okay, so in my case, this task that we are doing, I somehow started to do it by myself first. So I just like kind of continued to do it in this week. But surprisingly, on on Wednesday, so just the next day, I completely forgot it. And I remember that was, I think, my shittiest day of the whole week because I was very, very unconscious. And so I was just completely on autopilot most of the day. And I was really failing at the work to make things done. And I was like half of my time wasting on WhatsApp talking with people because I was like, I don't know, like nothing is working. And the other half was trying to search for some support for my PhD. And during Thursday and Friday, it was really, really good. I managed the whole week to do meditation on 20 minutes when I start the day and 20 minutes before going to bed, which I didn't add to what I was doing, and I really wanted to do it. And I also every time during the next days when I saw myself going into some kind of anxious state where I confronted some problems and I was like, okay, tried to handle, but I couldn't, and I saw my head like catastrophizing everything, like, oh, this will not work, and then you just go there like everything is going to hell, and then we're like, okay, stop there. And I tried to just like go into reality somehow, which also was one of my that's the first thing that is most important to me in this task, to just be present, or when I am not, just take just in this time when like figure it out that I am not being present, and then really fast going into reality. And the other was for me important was practicing mindfulness, which is basically doing by meditation. So that's something I managed to do during the whole week. And also not feeling guilty because, for example, I was, because I think I am not anymore, I was very used to be really strict. So when something I wanted to do something, for example, I don't know, a 30-day sport program or doing something every day, if I didn't do it, I don't know, I started and I was in day 10 and day 11 didn't work, then I was like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore because I failed, like, okay,
Yeah.
one day, and then I was stopping, and then I reconsidered the same thing maybe 2 weeks later and tried to do it again.
Good.
And always doing from the start. Even if I read a book, that happens also. I read it and then maybe leave it like half of it, and then I have too much things to do and maybe take it 1 month later. I always go and take it from the start instead of taking from the place that I did. And then I managed this week, because also one of my important things is to do sport at least 4 days per week. Not feeling guilty because I couldn't do a sport, because I enrolled on CrossFit and did like 1.5 months and do rugby at the same time. And I think I mess up with my lower back. So I had to say to myself, okay, 1 week of ibuprofen, no work, no sport, and also manage that I wasn't doing sport and not feeling guilty because I wasn't doing sport. I managed to do it and not feeling guilty. So that's also a very good thing for me. And during the weekend, something weird happened. So the weekend was good, but at the weekend I had some plans. I didn't feel the need to, or the lust to do it. And then I said, okay, I canceled them, and I was at home, and I feel like I don't want to be alone today or something. So I was like, call some friends, go out, and then spend the night at my friend's place. And then the next day we spent the day together. Like, we had breakfast, we watched The Godfather 2, like having lunch, etc. And then this friend of mine is also the people at work that helped me with my PhD. So we start talking about what was the problem, or what, if I was going well or if not, or whatever, like talking. And then the conversation drives me into this mode again, like, okay, this is not working, I'm stuck, I need help, blah blah blah. So instead of managing this thing in a good way, like, okay, like just talking for solution, etc., I was getting this anxiousness again, like I observe it and catastrophize again, and I couldn't go home because, I don't know, the conversation just turned out to give me so much anxiety. And say, okay, I spent the night also there at my friend's place, and we did some fun stuff so I can chill.
So let me interrupt for a minute. What would you say out of these experiences, what turned out well, and what, so if you summed them up or looked at them all together, what would you say what success was?
Yeah, what was the kind of a strength that you can identify?
The strength, I think, is that I didn't feel guilty for things that I wanted to do, but I couldn't because of physical inability, or because also I wasn't in a state of mind to do it. And that was the strength. And also successfully apply one of the things that I wanted every day, and I did it every day. And the weaknesses, it was, I think, this thing about this trying not to get into this path of future catastrophe thing that gets you physically anxious, and stop when you go there.
To some of these topics shortly. Okay, Alana?
Okay, so this week I spent a lot of the week just focusing on like my emotional and spiritual self.
Okay.
I realized that my internal voice can be pretty negative at times, whether that's me comparing myself to people or telling myself I'm not good enough for whatever reason. So success this week was I woke up every morning and I don't know, can you guys see me? No, you can't see me. Okay, now you can see me. So I jar, and every morning I wanted to write 3 things that I was positive for, and 3 things I was thankful for at the end of the day. So that's definitely success. Probably keep doing this because it's really helped me with planning out my days and just focusing on being more positive altogether. And then a failure probably this week is, even though I can do this and I try to see the positive out the days, I still mentally feel like I constantly compare myself to people. Mm-hmm. So I guess continuing with this, I want to stop doing that as much comparison and telling myself that I can't do something for whatever reason. Okay. It was a good week overall, and I'm glad that I decided to do this. It's helped a lot.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. No, that's good. And you seem really focused and disciplined about it, which is ideal. Will make the next weeks go really well. Cool. Greg?
Yeah, hi.
Hey.
Just thinking back on the week, a couple successes. One thing I wanted to focus on was just getting out of bed faster, not kind of laying around and hitting snooze a few times. And that's something that I was able to accomplish, except for Saturday and Sunday. I slept in a little bit.
Right.
But I it was easier for me to I think take that on because it's the first thing I thought about every day, and it was just kind of that mental like almost like check on myself, saying like, all right, just get up. From there, I was able to kind of be more of my ideal self. I made it into the gym a couple of additional times this week. Planning on going on at least once over the weekend, and I didn't. So it was kind of a shortfall on my part.
You just keep going, though. You know that. You just, you don't dwell on the failure. I mean, if you stop going completely, that's different. But if, you didn't go one day you were supposed to go, fine. Just keep moving,
Right. Yeah, I think my biggest shortcoming of the week was probably my diet, my lack of planning that went into it. I planned out a few meals to be healthy and like sort of meal prep, so to speak. But that was only 3 out of the dozen meals that I ate during the week. I found that I would go out and try to get a healthier option or a healthier meal from a restaurant, but I found myself like getting towards the end of the day or getting towards either it would be 3 o'clock and I hadn't eaten or 8 o'clock and I hadn't eaten, and I'd be like, all right, I'm too hungry right now. I'm not going to go to the store and buy food and make it up. I'm just going to go and get something quick. Right. So I think failing to plan was definitely my biggest kind of weakness or shortcoming on the week. So overall I felt pretty good about the week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Greg, what I'm hearing, and this really applies to everybody, that even when some things you wanted to change and you didn't change, I mean, Greg, what you're talking about is a higher level of awareness. Okay. Yeah. That's absolutely critical to making changes. I mean, if you don't know or not aware of and think about, and a little guilt, but that's a step towards doing it because you're aware of it. You don't feel really that great about yourself. And like we said, leave it alone, keep going. But with what almost everyone said, there's been this element of a higher level of awareness about your behavior. And that is a bona fide step in the right direction for being able to, to make the changes that you want. So that's ideal. That's ideal. And so, okay, in general, before Jesse's just coming back, before we move to that, I just want to make a few comments overall. I'm pretty thrilled that.
Sorry, helping to put the kids to bed.
I'm pretty thrilled that all of you feel like you had. No, Aaron's just sitting in.
Okay.
That it was a good week generally. That you were thinking about this a lot, even if it wasn't resulting in the activities or the actions or the thoughts or the feelings you wanted. When in a lot of cases it was, of course, but even when it wasn't, there was a step. Again, that awareness, the memory, remembering, the projecting. Oh, this is the kind of behavior I would like Greg. If you had, had it your way, you would have gone shopping. And some things that others of you said that you're probably not as far away from as you think you might be, because a lot of times we do these things and we don't think about them. They're not based on an awareness of I want to be doing better. So that's really cool. I mean, and I'm glad that everybody's feels like they're moving along here. So, okay, I'm gonna hand it over to Jesse.
Thanks. Okay, so in my mind, this is kind of like the pivotal moment in this whole class, I think.
Wow, wow, we're all here.
And that is kind of the pivot from immersion to sustainability. I think one thing we learned from what everybody shared is, and from what we've heard thousands of students share, is that immersing yourself in your ideals and trying to be your best self across all contexts, it's not sustainable.
It's impossible.
Right? It's impossible.
Basically. Yeah. We know that.
But the idea, right, of course, is to dive in and experience that immersion to the greatest degree you can, and then to decide how to proceed in a way that produces durable, long-lasting, sustainable self-change, right? And this is where most strategies, methods, programs of self-improvement fall down. I mean, anybody can, go to the gym every day for a week if they really set their mind to it, but afterwards, typically it's, you regress back to the mean, and that is who you were before. So I want to talk about a little bit now about some ideas about how to perform what we call basically the value audit, right? And then we're going to, next week, we're going to move, this coming week, we're going to kind of move to you guys still immersing yourself, but really deciding as you're moving through the week, what do I want to keep pressing forward on? What do I want to adopt long-term? And what is something that is okay for me to kind of put by the wayside because it's not something that I'm going to be able to do sustainably long-term. But the question is, how do you decide, right? How do you decide what to continue, what to adopt, and what to say goodbye to? So you could pick, what are the things I did this past week that were the easiest for me to do, right? Like things that just seemed like I just slipped into them and it was easier than I thought. Is it things that are the most improved, right? Like I started here, and by the end of the week I was here. I made that great progression. It could be that you pick things that other people noticed in you, that the things that I clearly showed a change in and other people gave me that positive feedback. Maybe those are the things I continue. But I think I would contend, Dad would probably agree, that it's really not about any of those things. It's really about what are the things that matter most to you? What do you truly care about? And to kind of push this forward, I want to kind of take a different approach to the approach we've taken so far, and kind of move away from the world of science for a little while and think about a counterintuitive approach, as our friend Mark Manson talks about. I don't know if you guys have heard about this book or seen it. Oh, it's backwards. This is like a juggernaut in the self-improvement industry. And when I first heard about it, I was like, great, yeah, okay. But you know what? This guy Mark, he's actually got some really good points. And I want to spend, this is good, we're right on time. I want to watch 10 minutes of an interview with Mark Manson, and then I want to follow up with some comments. So
this is the Marie Forleo interview.
I'm going to share, I got to share my screen first. Oh, wait, hold on. Wait, hold on a second. We got a comment here. Hold on a second. All right, well.
Most jobs or professions or businesses are not glamorous 99% of the time.
Yep.
It's hard work. And so I would ask you this. You said that you enjoy writing. You enjoy pouring words out. Do you struggle with that ever? Like, do you ever find yourself, meaning, do you like the shit sandwich that comes along with writing?
I absolutely struggle with it, but I enjoy it.
Yes.
There's a difference. So for instance, like I could never do what you do. Like I'm fine coming here doing an interview,
sure,
but just video, the whole thing, I've tried it and it's just
not your jam.
Yeah. It's just like the struggles involved in doing all of this. It's just, it's not for me. It's like, it feels stifling. It feels difficult. It feels like I don't know what I'm doing. Whereas with the writing stuff, it's like, I get this sick pleasure out of like sitting in my room until 4 a.m, like deleting a paragraph over and over and over again. Like there's something it hurts, but there's like something invigorating about it for me. And so it makes sense. In hindsight, it makes sense that I ended up there. So yeah, the pain is totally still there. It's just, it's the pain you want. It's the pain you enjoy. I mean, to make like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I don't know if you've ever seen
I haven't.
Pumping Iron.
I haven't.
So there's a part in Pumping Iron. It's the documentary about him as a bodybuilder. There's a part in Pumping Iron where they're asked, like, he would go to the gym for like 4 hours a day, and he would literally like do squats until he passed out and like all this crazy stuff. And so the documentary guy is asking him, he's like, doesn't this, like, this looks, you're torturing yourself. Like, this looks horrible. And Schwarzenegger's like, yeah, but he's like, I love the pain. Like, he's like, I love the pain of like lifting weights. He compared it to having an orgasm. He's like, I come every day in the gym is an orgasm. He said it differently, but you could find it on YouTube if you really care. But it's like, that's what I'm talking about. It's like, we all have that pain that like we get like some sick pleasure out of, and we have to leverage that, you know, because that's what's going to bring us to success.
I love it. I want to move on to the topic of uncertainty, which is
Yes.
another topic that you cover in the book. And I
Mhm.
think it's a really important topic because it freaks a lot of people out.
Yeah.
You said something I thought was very insightful. Certainty is the enemy of growth.
hmm
And so let's talk about that for a minute. And I have something
Okay.
else under certainty.
Um,
Uncertainty.
yeah, there's an old adage. I think it's like some Greek philosopher, somebody much smarter than I am, said something like a man who thinks he knows everything learns nothing. And it's true. I mean, if you think you know everything that's true about your life, then you're going to be less motivated to try something different. You're going to be less motivated to take different perspectives. And this plays into, especially like a lot of people who struggle with like fear or anxiety. You know, if you take somebody with like social anxiety, usually there's some certainty underlying that. Like, they're certain that like these people are going to think they're a loser, or they're certain that these people like don't want to talk to them. And they never actually think to question that certainty, that, you know, maybe actually people in a room aren't thinking about you. Maybe they're just as nervous as you are. Maybe the conversation you just had where you had ketchup on your shirt, like, doesn't really matter, and everybody's going to forget it in 10 minutes. And so it's actually this constant questioning of your assumptions becomes very liberating in many ways once you're able to do it.
I think that's very true in business as well.
Yes.
It's essential.
Yeah.
You know, if you think you're certain of your business model, of your audience, of how things are going to look over the next year, especially if you have a business model that has any interaction with the digital space,
Yeah.
that certainty will kill you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It changes really fast. And it's, you know, one of the most important lessons in sales is you meet the customer where they are, not where you are, you know? So if I think my book is great, I could walk around all day and night being like, this is the best thing ever, you should read this. But it doesn't, if I'm so certain in myself, if I'm not paying attention to the people I'm trying to reach and the audience and the readers and what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and I'm not willing to question my own assumptions about what's good, what works, what helps people, you're just gonna end up with a crappy book that only you like and nobody else does.
Well, thankfully, that's not the case here because it now is a New York Times bestseller,
Yes,
which
yeah.
is awesome. You know, there's another bit of uncertainty that I pulled from the book. This was really powerful. You can't be an important and life-changing presence for some people without also being a joke and an embarrassment to others.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Boldness, doing anything boldly, taking any sort of bold action or stance on anything, by its very nature, it's polarizing. So you're going to cause a very positive reaction in some people, but you also cause a very negative reaction in other people. And the reasons why, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the point is that there's always, you know, just to boil it down to like internet memes, haters gonna hate. Like there's always gonna be haters, no matter what you do, unless you just sit at home and do nothing. You know, there's gonna be haters for everything. And it's important to understand that dichotomy, that you can't do anything great and not be criticized by somebody somewhere. And accepting that has been very helpful for me in a lot of times in my life, and not even just in business or with my writing, but like in my personal relationships, dating, for instance. Like if you're going to put yourself out there and really show your personality, you're going to turn some people off. And so I think a lot of people, not to get off from too much on a tangent, but like a lot of people who struggle in dating, it's because they want to be liked by everybody. But the result is that they're loved by no one because they're so afraid of being rejected.
It's true in many areas of life. Okay, I'm moving on to the meat of everything. And this is, I think, what I love most about the book. You said giving too many fucks is bad for your mental health. And I could not agree more. One of the things for me in my life that I'm constantly working on is simplicity. How can I make things more simple, especially in a world that is shoving more, bigger, do all these things down your throat all the time. So I'm curious, what have you personally learned to not give a fuck about? That's question number one. Like from doing this work, from writing this, from having millions of people read it, and then also turning it into a full-fledged book. What are some of the highlights?
Well, a lot of it, I mean, the first and most obvious one that comes to mind is a lot of the criticism. I mean, there's a difference between smart criticism, thoughtful criticism, and then just, Neanderthals like banging a keyboard, calling you 4-letter names. And it's very hard to let go of that at first. But interestingly, I would also say that throughout, my writing, and you could probably relate to this, like building a big platform online, being so visible, you almost have to be a little bit skeptical of anything that's said about you. You can't, because if you listen too much to the good stuff, it starts going to your head and you start thinking like, oh, I got it. This is the right stuff. And you can't let that happen either. And so I try to be very careful in how I gauge the reactions to my work. I want to hear criticisms. I want to hear support, but I want it to be of a certain kind of like thoughtfulness and just for me personally, like getting away from the business stuff. I mean, I spent most of my 20s pursuing things that sound really cool and fun. So I traveled tons of countries, went to a bunch of big parties, dated a lot of girls, started some businesses, started making money. And like, it was all this really cool, fun stuff. Basically all these goals that I established when I was like 22, 23. It's like, this is what I want to do. And by the time I was 27, 28, I had accomplished a lot of them. And the funny thing is I kind of went into this identity crisis because I suddenly realized that none of those things really mattered that much. It's like, okay, that was fun, but none of that really
was fulfilling.
Yeah, and none of it meant anything. Like that was the thing I kept coming back to, is it's like it didn't really mean anything. And so I had this like year-long period where I was like, all right, what do I do that's meaningful? Like all this stuff going on in my life, like where am I going to find that meaning? And so this book is very much a reflection of that process I went through myself, of letting go of a lot of those very sexy, headline-grabbing life goals, that, I don't know, maybe like sell a lot, on Facebook or something. But just learning that's not actually what mattered in the end,
Okay. Thanks for watching that with us. It's an interesting perspective, and it's not one that science generally has to offer. It's a very surprisingly practical perspective on self-development for a book that's sold 7 million copies. Usually the books that sell 7 million copies are about, manifesting your truth, or the power of the law of attraction or something like that. But this book's I'm not saying that being a bestseller is everything, but for a book that has a lot of sort of practical wisdom from a guy who really seems to be kind of open about himself and open about kind of figuring out what he cares about and what his strengths are, and who to care about and what to care about and what to just kind of let go. I mean, the thing's been on the top 10 of the New York Times bestseller list for 120 weeks. I mean, this is crazy. It's a real phenomenon. So basically, the take home here is that we think that one really essential element to longevity with the self-development process is figuring out, really looking deep and deciding, and it doesn't have to happen all at once, but over time, what are the things that are most important to you? And then the other piece of it is building from strengths, right? So there may be things that are really important to you, but you're just terrible at. I can think of a few for myself. I could probably call out a few for Dad too. And so even sometimes if there are things that are of value to you and that you care about, but you're just not good at, they're not strengths. And maybe this week you realize that it's just not working. Just because you value something doesn't mean that you necessarily have to pursue it long term. So it's kind of it's a blend of this clarifying your values, simplifying, and focusing on strengths. Does that make sense?
Right. And what Mark Manson's talking about, the crucial part of that interview they built up to was at the end, where he was basically making the point in his book of one, in a way, kind of simple thing that we need to deal with in our lives in general, and even during this process, is that what should you really care about and what should you not care about? And sometimes thinking about that and getting down to it, and I know for myself, sometimes it's like, wow, I really put a whole bunch of time into stuff that is not that important to my life. And that's the highest order of business for me. What's really important for my growth, my well-being. And I should let go of some of that. And sometimes it's just that realization where it's like, okay, I'm going to let go of it. Other times it's more difficult. So there are a couple of chats here. Did people have some questions?
Oh,
okay.
We got some positive reactions to the subtle art of not giving a fuck. Cool. Let's see, close. Okay, so maybe we should take, if people need to run and refill their beverage or go to the bathroom or something, let's take a very quick break here, just maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And then we'll come back and we're going to talk about sort of what we'll be doing this coming week. And that'll wrap her up. So we're going to start at like 8:08 in like 3 minutes. All right, folks, about 60 seconds here, and then we'll just, we'll be in a sprint to the finish. Well, actually, we're not going to be in a sprint. We're going to slow down. We're going to think slow, and we're going to move slow to the finish. So,
This will. Yeah.
okay, 808s. Before we move on, we wanted to give the class an opportunity. If somebody sort of had any kind of insight or anything that popped into their mind that they wanted to share with the class over the last, 10 or 15 minutes, anything that you thought, I mean, we had some reactions to the book. So does anybody want to make any comments or ask any questions before we move on toward thinking about what's happening this coming week?
I wanted to bring up something that I was thinking about a lot this week is that, like, what is it? So if we know what we, like the idea of what our ideal self is, what is it that actually makes us not be it, or makes it kind of so hard to achieve, or maybe in some cases like less hard than we actually anticipated it to be? What is it that like creates that gap? And then following on to that, if our natural tendency is to be kind of who we are today, why is that not our ideal self?
Right. So
easy question.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Wow. That's something difficult.
Yes.
So my first answer is everything, and that sometimes, I mean, the biggest barrier people have these days, Jesse and I were talking about it before, biggest barrier is time. Most of us have a dysfunctional relationship with time. We let time control us. And as long as time is controlling you, you are not going to be able to do what you need to do in your life. I know that sounds overly simplistic, but I don't think it is. That if you're always fighting against time, and I have a list of like 30 time dysfunctions that I use in class, always being late, having people wait for you, not knowing how long something takes, like, why do my students always get to class late? They don't know how long it takes to get up and get dressed. I mean, haven't they been doing that their whole lives? So time is one. Another one is lack of confidence is a fairly big one. Feeling that, I can't do this. I'd love to do it, but I can't do it. And it's sort of a good way to just let it go. Or the best one is relegating it to the future. I can't work out right now. I'm really screwing up, but boy, wait till summer. Oh man, when summer comes, I'm really going to be working out all the time. By the time summer comes, you've forgotten about it. So, and there are others, Allison, too, that figure in here that become barriers.
Yeah, I wanted to just follow up on what you said about time, and I'm glad you started with that, and I totally agree. I think a lot of it is there are these sort of more existential crises, like, yes, a lack of confidence in some areas. What are other people going to think of me? But those are always going to be there, and you can work on those in different kind of ways. But I think for this class is really about the moment to moment, right? About process, about being who you want to be and who you care about being from moment to moment. So it's really about taking control of time rather than letting time control you, I guess. and I think, you know, the more we've dug into this and the more we study it, the more I think it's really about this idea of slowing down, you know, and being mindful, and not just, you know, straight mindfulness, which, you know, is the more we move across these years, you know, mindfulness, meditation, you know, Zen, presence, all this stuff. I mean, that is becoming, right? I mean, it's in all the elementary schools now. I mean, this is like they're realizing that meditating is like a shower for the mind, you know? I mean, Jerry Seinfeld said that, for God's sakes. So the point is that, you know, it's kind of blending that mindfulness, Zen, be here now perspective with a conscious stream of thought about what's important to me, values, exactly. So it's kind of blending that.
Well, being able to do more than one thing at a time, thinking about what do I value the most about what I'm doing.
And you're only going to be able to consider those things and think about those things rationally if you slow your thinking down, right? So I don't know if that really answers your question, but the way that this process has worked for me is when I've been able to slow my thinking down and bring this process to mind, and take the time to be able to deliberately, consciously think about my actions, my decisions, other people's reaction to me. When you can get to that point, I think a lot of people really start to see some really great gains, and you get a lot of positive feedback, right? So then it starts to be really rewarding when you're just like, wow, I just completely controlled that situation from my perspective, right? Like I didn't control them, I didn't control what happened, but I was in perfect control of myself.
So did that help, Allison?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you brought it up, because having control of time is probably, especially these days, the most important factor in, you know, being your ideal self, making changes, feeling good about yourself and everything else, because we always seem to be so distracted. And to what I talk about in class a lot is that, you know, so many of my students are addicted to their cell phones. So when they happen to be having a thought, you know, or they're bored or they're not doing something, they look at a screen, which summarily, you know, distracts them, you know, so they're not thinking. And it is dangerous thinking. You know, if you take the time to think, what are you going to normally think about? Generally, things you don't want to think about. Oh, why am I this way? Or why aren't things going the right way? And people don't understand that once you get into that you start working it out. You don't have to have it all worked out. You have to start the process. And it becomes less threatening of saying, well, I don't want, and my students have told me, I don't like thinking. I don't like reflecting because I think of stuff I don't like about myself. And I said, well, what are you going to do? Avoid it your whole life? And like I said, once you get started on it, the whole bad feeling goes away. You don't have to all complete it. So, okay, here's
wait, hold on. We got to raise Sam. Aaron, you want to say something?
Hey, yeah, Jesse, if you don't mind, I just wanted to add something.
At all, yeah. Hi.
Yeah, so I just kind of had this
showing
thought.
this video.
Hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I just remembered from when I read the book, kind of on the same topic, something I liked that Mark Manson had mentioned was this idea that action. So he talked a lot about motivation. And he also kind of mentioned something I hadn't really thought of, which is that we can think about something and then that might give us motivation, but sometimes action can also lead to motivation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I like that idea because I think something that I run into a lot when I do some of these mindfulness exercises, or sometimes when I'm just sitting there thinking, is sometimes, I know Eric mentioned the difference between, you know, ruminating and thinking or you know, guided thinking. So sometimes with me, I'll ruminate a lot. And so sometimes what I've kind of realized is that it's better to just start and just do something rather than sit there and ruminate. So I kind of just wanted to mention the difference because I think that was something that was interesting that Mark Manson brought up, because that helps me a lot, is just sometimes just starting and then get the ball rolling.
You got it. You got it. And this is one of our Worthy Dozen tools, right? This is basically the do good, be good, right? Start with action, and the character development will follow. You know, my old advisor Tim Wilson talks about this as the story editing, right? Editing your narrative approach. Once you do something and you realize you're the kind of person who does do this kind of thing, then your story about yourself changes. Okay, Dad, you want to talk about kind of moving forward here?
All right. So here's our shift to what we're doing next week. Okay. So listen carefully to this, because we're the most important part of all this is process. Okay. And one of the reasons that I always tell my students that and tell people that my classes have no content. They're all about process, about behavior. You know, there are no tests or quizzes or anything, but and the interesting thing about learning process is that you can do it over and over again on your own. So even with this whole course, if, you know, a year from now you start thinking, wow, I'm you know, I've kind of let go of a bunch of this stuff. Well, maybe I'll do it again. And maybe the second time around, you don't need the coaching. You don't need hearing other people. You know, I'm going to be my ideal self. I'm going to keep track of it. I'm going to be reflective every night about it, or write about it, whatever. So that if you learn the process, you have a real skill. It's not like you'd have to come back to us and say, oh, hey, you guys running another course, I need to take it again. If you wanted to, fine. But so think of process here. Also, now think about what you did this week, and think about what things you valued the most. Okay. What's most important to you about the changes you made? Now, you were supposedly doing ideal self across every context, which we know from the beginning is impossible to do. We didn't tell you that, and not to be mean, but it produces an effect. And what the effect is of trying out everything ideal is certain things emerge that are more important to you right now, values here, okay? So you've turned out, and some of you have mentioned this already, you know, what's turned out to be most valuable? What do you want to work on? What do you not want to work on right now? So think about this shift to what's really important, and there's no specific number here, but what's important for you to do. And also, there can also be a shift to slower change if you like. Okay. Now, if it's working, being your ideal self and, you know, being successful 60, 70, 80% of the time, that's great. That's great. That will just lead to more. Or if you think it would be better to say, okay, I need to be more intentional. I need to make a plan, go a little bit slower. How am I going to go to week to week? Where will I be? I'm here today. This is what I'm doing. Let's use a really easy example. Going to the gym, right? So right now, you're going to the gym regularly twice a week. So you said, okay, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be going 3 times a week. A week after that, I'm going to extend my stay at the gym a little bit. The week after that, maybe I'll go another time, and maybe that'll be where I want to be, 4 times a week or something. You understand what I'm saying? I'm being a little general, but because how you set it up needs to be based on what you think is best for you. If you like the ideal self 100% of the time, go for it. If that's kind of overwhelming, or you want to take time away from being ideal self across many contexts and really focus on, you know, fewer, that's fine too. So it's going to take a little time here for you to think about, and we'll have time for questions and stuff, of how you want to shape it now. So the whole point of being your ideal self across all contexts, we've ended that basically, unless you're doing that and it totally works, but there are very few people who do that. And we're thinking planning, evaluating, how do I want to do this, to continue to do this? And it's really important to be intentional. And writing it down, making a plan, and keeping up with it. Keeping track is so important to change. It's such a small thing, but it is so important that you don't forget it. You can look back at your progress. You're sort of responsible to yourself every day, things of that nature. So now, while you're doing this, the context, the general context is in general trying to be your best self across all contexts. So don't just say, okay, here are the things I'm doing. I'm going to ditch everything else. Because having some of that going, and again, it's up to you. Having some of that going is very supportive. You know, going back to systems theory, everything's connected to everything else. And so that's, am I, you know, are we agreeing on this? Okay.
Definitely.
So that's basically it. And, you know, we'll be sending out, you know, little support statements this week and all, but think now, and we'd like to hear from some of you, how would you like to, how are you going to make this next week work? And of course, at the end of next week, we're going to talk about maintaining, about motivation, things like that, so you can continue. But this is, you know, week one, yet last week is your experimental week, right? This is you're sort of honing it a little bit. And after this, you know, it's like, how do I keep doing it?
And this is also a good time to go back and review the tools that we talked about in week 2. And, you know, these worthy dozen tools that we talked about, really, this is what we've distilled as the best of evidence from science, right? So that doesn't mean it's perfect. And obviously the whole perspective we just kind of adopted right now from, you know, is from a guy who is about as far from a scientist as you can get. So it's not all about science, but this is a good time to go back and review that set of tools and to be ready to kind of pull them out of your virtual toolbox and use them whenever you
can. So somebody offer.
Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes. So yeah, we'd love to hear any feedback you guys have, or any questions, maybe concerns about the next week, any things something you're worried about, or
what are you going to do or continue to do? We could go around and call on everybody.
I know.
Thank you, Meg.
So the question being, like, what am I going to continue doing? So I'm going to probably try to keep going to my early morning, or to me, early morning,
Right.
Yoga classes, the days that it makes sense in my schedule, being like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That definitely made a big difference for my week. And I don't, you know, it's interesting because, like, it was no surprise to me that the whole bedtime thing was my struggle. It's been, like, literally my lifelong struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
It's true.
yeah. And so for a long time, kind of like what you guys were saying tonight, I've kind of like leaned into my, like, night owl ways and just been like, this is just my schedule and this is just different. So trying to kind of reconcile that, as far as, like, finding that in between, that balance of, like, still going to bed early enough that I'm not, like, feeling so drained when I want to get up and go to a class, and
Right.
that's, like, not even crazy early.
And Megan, you know, here's the thing. You want to be nice to yourself.
Yeah.
As long as you were moving in the right direction. Speed is not that important.
Right.
So if it takes you a month to get that sleeping, getting up in the morning schedule together, as long as you were generally, not every single day, but generally moving in that direction, experiencing some progress, who cares if it takes a month or two? Because when you've done it, it's done. You know, instead of, you know, like trying to do it in a week and you can't do it and you just give up.
Right.
But it does take more attention, takes keeping track, things like that.
I just wanted to reiterate super quickly, because you had mentioned, okay, what am I going to continue with, right? And I think it's important for us to reiterate that the idea isn't for you to know what you're going to continue with right now. The idea is for you to really focus on deciding what you're going to continue with over the next week, right? So you see the two shapes of these graphs. This is kind of what the first option, right? Like this line is this class. So moving forward, you just shave off 50 or 60 or 70% of what you've been doing and just go, well, you don't really know, right? The idea is we don't know exactly what we value. We don't know how to build from our strengths. What's most important? It's the idea of gradually over the next week, really focusing on what are the things that are working for you? What are the things that really matter to you? while still maintaining this idea of being your ideal self across contexts, right?
Yeah. So we're talking about process again. It's not like you need to know right now, but it would be a good idea to spend a little time, think about it over the next day, later tonight, tomorrow, and say, okay, so maybe, and could even be something that you haven't been doing that much, that you've decided is very valuable. Maybe you've done it a little bit and you say, wow, I'd really like to do more of that. So maybe you experimented with doing some reflective writing every day or something, and you haven't focused on it, but you're starting to think that would be really valuable. I got something really good out of that. So I'm going to continue doing that. And that's going to be one of my focal points. Or again, there's so many perspectives. We're handing a lot of control over to you right now. That's why this might seem a little confusing, because you need to make some decisions about, even if you're doing something and you're being really successful at it, but you find out after thinking about it, it's not that important, and that there are other more important things. So this whole first week was about that. That's why it's immersive, ideal self in every context as much as you can. And I loved hearing people saying, what would my ideal self be? What would my ideal self do right now? So is this fairly clear? Ask questions.
Yeah, we've got a couple minutes
please.
left. That's pretty much what we've got. Again, we'll be sending you supporting materials over the week with the daily dose. But if there are any last questions, points of clarity, please.
And of course, email us anytime. If we need to talk on the phone, we can do that too. That's absolutely fine. We want to make sure that, especially what goes on over the next day or two, is something that's well thought out, based on what we would call a value audit, determining what's most important. And it doesn't mean you can never change it, of course. And again, remembering that you want to do a really good job, but you're also, in this process, you need to be nice to yourself. If you're not nice to yourself, you're going to give it up and let it go, because I do. That's why. So again, it's, some questions you need to ask yourself, and to be mindful of it. It's really good daily to either, towards the end of the day, if you like writing, to write about it. If you don't like writing, still saying, I'm taking 15 minutes. It's on my calendar. It's not like, oh, I'm not writing, so I'm just going to let it go or forget it. And just sit and say, okay, how did today go? Or what am I thinking about? What do I want to do? Jesse and Eric asked this. It is so valuable. So valuable. And some of you do it already.
And next week, we're going to be focusing mainly on motivation maintenance, and working to adopt some long-term habits that are going to set you up for success long-term. Right. So we actually have another appointment to run to, so we're not going to be able to stick around late tonight.
A few minutes, we can.
But we will be here for a couple minutes. Otherwise, we're done.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for committing to this and doing such a good job. Like I said, we'll hang for a little bit if you have some questions. Otherwise, we will see you later. Thanks for coming.
Thanks a lot.
Guys,
Thanks,
I have
guys.
some questions about the book. I read it once, and now I'm reading again the subtle art of not giving a fuck, and taking some notes. And I remember that I was having some kind of a struggle to understand what exactly means to search for our values. I'm trying to maybe think that this is what we are doing here somehow. I don't know.
Well, I'm not entirely clear what you're asking. Put it in a question for me.
Like the book itself talk about that at the end of the day, what somehow tells you what to give a fuck or not.
Right.
Is at the end of the day your values. So
Right.
I remember that the book says like you should search for your values so you can know what is basically important to you.
Okay. So when you get, that's why it's nice to be reflective at the end of the day, to be able to say, okay, what of the things did I do today were of the greatest value? It could be emotionally, socially, physically, anything else. But to do that, what we call a value audit. It's like, okay, so I did this. How much did this add to my day? Not very much. Okay, so maybe I don't need to do it that much. Or I spent some time with friends. Wow, that was really valuable in my day. And I think what Mark Manson is talking about is evaluating things and saying, what do I give a fuck about and what don't I? I can't care about everything. And I'm certainly going to, not ignore everything either. So it's like kind of choosing, maybe at the end of the day or whenever you're thinking. And what I would do, Ignacy, is say, what brings the greatest value to my life, whether socially, emotionally, intellectually, physically? And those are the things I want to keep doing because those make me grow, make me more conscious, make me more comfortable being a human being on the planet. And heaven knows that's a difficult one these days, considering what's going on. So it's getting in the habit of, again, doing that value audit. What's working for me? And also that has to be related to how easy is it? So if it's something that's incredibly hard, that is of great value, that's fine, but maybe you mix that up with something that's a little easier and of great value. So it's like, oh, I'm sweating it out here. Oh, here I'm not. I'm doing really well here. And this, makes me feel better. And I go away, I get through the day and I think like, okay, this was a good day and this is how I want to do it tomorrow. But I don't think people look at their values that way. I don't think that people are just conscious of asking themselves questions because most people, certainly the students I teach, most people fall asleep in front of a cell phone or television and don't take time in between. Even if you're going to do that, fine, taking some time to just say, okay, I'm going to go upstairs, lie in my bed, stare at the ceiling for 15 minutes and just ask myself a few questions. And it's so valuable. It's such an easy task. And if you can't do it for 15 minutes, do it for 5, then do it for 10, and then finally do it for 15. So did that help the idea of doing that value audit?
Yeah. It helps.
We got to go, Dad.
Yeah, we got to run. Listen, if you have other questions, email me, okay?
Okay.
We'll go from there. Cool.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
See you later. You want to take us off here? That was okay. I did pretty well.